We've just got a big shipment coming in now of the new Primal RAW CCC rods. So these are pretty cool. They're new for this year, and we've been playing around with these for a couple of years now. So it's been a really interesting project. I think it's a pretty cool new technology that we're bringing in, and let me talk you through it. So this is Primal CCC, or compressed carbon chain. So we still have the original Primal RAW technologies in this rod. So the first technology was the UHC, which is a ultralight helical core. So if I explain that, is inside of the blank, the first layer is a 45-degree spiral which runs up the blank, and that spiral basically gives the rod compression strength. So instead of the rod potentially splitting when it's under pressure or it curves, it has really good compression strength from this ultralight helical core. That core has another technology in it, which is a nano resin. We call that ANR, or amplified nano resin. So the key part there is we use it only in that core. So those nano resins, they are used in loads of different rods, and I think everyone talks about how awesome it is for different properties, but really where nano resins come into their own is in compression. So they really help to change the structure of the plastic, and so the resin is a plastic, right? And so they help to create a really nice structure in it, and that helps the compression of the blank. And so it doesn't really do anything to longitudinal fibers or the action of the blank, but it does a heck of a lot to compression. So that's where we use it. So we've got firstly that helical core, and then we've got that nano resin that it was within that core, and it gives you really great compression. So that's a really important part of the strength of these rods, and so that stays within this series also. So of course, if you have you've bought the original Primal RAW, then you'll love it. It's still a great rod. This has just got a couple of new things in it. The longitudinal fibers, or the ones that run along the length of the rod, it's a really great pre-preg from Toray. So there's loads of great manufacturers of carbon fiber. The predominant good ones are out of the US, so there's a couple of good ones out of the US, and they manufacture a lot of the US rod brands use those. So they obviously manufacture for the US aerospace manufacturers. And then the other carbon fiber manufacturers who are really high quality are the Japanese. And so two of them, really, Mitsubishi or Toray. We use Toray. We've got a bunch of Toray pre-pregs which are used of different modulus. Essentially what we use is a very high modulus within the butt of the rod that gives it that stiffness, and it means we don't have to use a lot of material. So you get these very crisp rods which are light, which is cool. The other thing in these Toray pre-pregs is they're very low resin content. So we don't have lots of plastic holding the fiber together because those resins are so good in those pre-pregs. So really cool technology there, and again, kind of consistent high quality from Toray, who are a great Japanese pre-preg manufacturer. So that's the core of what the original RAWs were, is that amplified nano resin, the ultralight helical core, and these great pre-pregs from Toray. Now in this new model is called CCC, and we have what's called compressed carbon chain. So the interesting part of the process is these really low resin content pre-pregs. One of the downsides is in the manufacture process is those pre-pregs, because they haven't got a lot of resin in them, they tend to shrink. And so keeping compression on the blank throughout the manufacture process is really difficult. So what we now have in CCC is an external wrap on the blank, which is also carbon fiber, and that is wrapped, it's not as tight as a helical on the core, but it is wrapped on the outside of the blank, and that basically shrinks faster than the rest of the blank during the curing process. So what happens during the cure is these longitudinal fibers along the length of the rod are all compressed with this external wrap, and that compression gives you a really dense blank, and so it does a few things. It makes it really strong, It also makes the blank really consistent so you don't have any dead spots. And then the nice thing is when you have the finished blank is it's actually very, very crisp and you have a lot of feeling through it. So I think great for casting because you'll feel through the blank a lot better. And then again, really great for people who are stripping flies. So if you're streamer fishing or if you're stillwater fishing, then you'll feel a lot more through these rods than you would a normal rod. So that is Primal RAW CCC. So that compressed carbon chain is that compression of the blank from that external wrap. It's pretty cool and some pretty neat technology that we've got in these rods now. So as far as components are concerned, we've updated the reel seat. So when you look at this reel seat, you'll see there's a lot more metal cut away from the reel seat. So there's some really nice porting in both the locking nut and in the hood. So all that does is reduces weight. So the locking nut's actually really nicely grooved, which gives you really good purchase when you're unscrewing it. And again, it just is cut away nicely so you reduce weight. There's a really nice stabilized Burl wood insert in there, which is pretty cool. There's some really nice natural variation in those reel seats, which is really great. That reel seat itself is type 2 anodized, so that makes it nice and durable, and it keeps that really consistent finish. We've actually updated handle shapes, so I think the handle shape's a really critical part of any rod. So the 5 and the 6 9-footers have this nice new updated handle shape. One of the things you'll notice is handles are relatively short, so not too short that it won't handle a variety of hand sizes or won't compensate for different hand sizes, but the shorter length is really good for bringing your hand down towards the reel and really making sure that you're forcing flex into the lower part of the rod, and I think that's a really nice part. It also means that your hand doesn't drift up the handle throughout the cast, or it makes sure that everyone is holding that rod right in the right place. So that's pretty cool. A nice little winding check on here. Obviously hook keeper. You'll see that finish is a nice matte black. You can see the texture of that CCC in there, but for us here in New Zealand, we really love that stealthy black finish. I think our Australian friends who are fishing lake edges and stalking trout in shallow lake edges like in Tasmania, then that matte stealthy finish is always good as well. One of the things we've done is, so we've kept that stainless SIC stripping guide there, but we have changed to a titanium coat snake guide. So our friends in Europe at FFE, they've really pushed us to move to a snake guide on these. I think it gives you a much more stable guide, and I think for some fly lines you won't get as much squeaking through them as you will on a single foot, especially on like a clear intermediate. That's pretty good. The snake guides are on there. You'll notice that guide sizes are really nice and small. And then I think the resin and the finishing on these is really top notch. So we've really worked hard to reduce the size of each wrap and really slim down the resin on these rods. That the focus really is reducing weight. So you really continue to design some weight reduction in there, and that really is making sure that we're getting the rod to perform as well as possible. So that's the finish on CCC. On the longer rod, this is a 9.5 for a 6, so you'll see I've worn that handle pretty heavily in testing. This rod's been a good rod over winter. This has a fighting butt on it. The other 9.5 footer is the 7 weight, which has a slightly larger Wells grip, because you've got a heavier rod which needs a slightly bigger grip to get it to flex well. We've also got that bigger grip along with a fighting butt on the 2 10-footers. So to describe the blanks, the 9-foot rods are really great all-purpose rod for river fishing or stalking lake edges. They have all the power you want for long distance casts and throwing nice, fast, high line speed, tight loops. But they still have plenty of movement and easy flex in the tip and midsection. So I think it's a really, really important part of a fast action modern fly rod. Is not only does it deflect and recover really, really quickly, the other part of it is we want it to bend nicely. We want it to be easy to cast. So these aren't just made for expert anglers and nobody else can work them. These are made for anyone to be able to pick them up and get great performance out of them. So that's the 9-footers. The 9.5 footers, I would say, are really great big river rods. The 9.5 for a 6 or a 7, again, good lake shore rods, I think. Then the 10-footers, we've really made those as specialist stillwater rods. So I think for me, the 10-footers are a really big rod on the river. Some guys like them. I find the 9.5-footers probably a better river rod. And then I think these 10-footers, those coming out are built as really specialist stillwater rods for lock style fishing, especially the 10-foot. Number 7 is, I'd say that's a great sinking line rod, and then the 10-foot number 6 is really good for floating lines, intermediates, and light sink work. So that's the range of rods. The final part of the puzzle for these new CCC rods is updated rod tubes. So this is an ABS plastic tube. The nice thing about it is it's not a round shape, so it won't roll around the back of your car, which is good, so they don't drift all over the place. Still fits nicely on the side of a backpack. So the strap can either be cinched in tight, so if it's in a backpack it's out of the way, or opened up and just chucked over your shoulder. Pretty neat little tube. Then it's actually a sealed tube, so one of the things I'd make sure you do is if you've got a rod which is wet and then you put it into the liner and then pack it into the tube, then you will have mold potentially coming up on the rod if you leave it for a long time. So best thing to do, I reckon, is make sure the rod's dry, chuck it in the liner, and then you can pack it away. But great to have it sealed so that you're not getting water, especially on a trip. So that's the tube. Label there on the end is telling you what the model is, and especially useful if you've got a few of them. So that's the tube. And then the rod bags are the same, just a couple of ties on there, and obviously separated out to break those sections up and keep them from rattling with each other. Pretty neat little finish on them as well. So check these out in store. That is Primal RAW CCC compressed carbon chain. Really neat rods. Made to perform on the water and be really great casting rods, but more than anything, great fishing rods. So check them out in store and enjoy your season.